water. So while our actors are finding their place in the audience, I'm inviting our panelists to come up and take their place at the stage. Thank you so much. And while our panelists are coming up, because this is a school night, and guys in the booth, would you mind bringing the lights up on the audience a little bit, or dimming the lights on the stage a little bit so we can see each other? Thank you so much. So we want to keep things moving. I'm going to plant the first seed of the first question that I'll ask you as soon as the panelists are done with their brief opening remarks. So here it is. We'd love you to think about this question. We'll come back to you in just a couple seconds, and we'll move through a few themes in our discussion. This is the first one. Now that you've seen these actors going for broke with minimal rehearsal, trying to make sense of this ancient play, this play that never gets performed because it's so hard, bringing it to life, making sense of it before our eyes, and you know the play was written and performed over 2,500 years ago in the center of Athens, in a century in which those Athenians saw nearly 80 years of war. In spite of the distance of culture and time, in spite of the fact that this was written so long ago, the question is simply this: what did you recognize this evening that spoke as truthful to you, to your own experiences, that spoke to you personally or professionally? We're going to come back to that in a few seconds. Before we do, I'm going to turn things over to our panel. What I forgot to mention is whoever's making the best eye contact gets to go first, and you just volunteered yourself, James. That's okay. You've also just jumped in to fill a space for someone else. I really appreciate it. But if you take it from here, let our panelists introduce yourselves, and then go right into your comments. Thank you so much.
Hello, how you doing? My name is James Dobbins. I'm the director of Guns Down Life Up, Lincoln Hospital. I did an excellent job, very passionate on the whole play and everything. It captured me, of the weapons, having that weapon. It just reminded me of having that weapon and that power, and it's abusing it, and taking it, and just having that, and him killing his whole family. And then the regrets after it all happened. And then what really caught me was the friend, how he was there for him. Because I know that from my experience in life, and when you just caught up and you have that weapon, I kind of reflected on how you just do the wrong things and take people's lives, if it's selling drugs or just being in that lifestyle and just doing so much negativity. And then after his friend, after he went through all those harmful situation in his life, as far as his whole family being affected, how his friend stood by him there and still try to pull some positive things out of the whole situation. And it kind of reminded me of the work that we do, being a mentor for the kids and being there for people, and showing them that's not the end, and out of all those situations, you still try to pull some good out of the whole thing. So it was very it reminded me of a real life situation, and just mentoring the kids and being there for them and standing there, by their side, and leading them to another direction, even though how crazy it was that he took everyone's life. That was real dramatic, and that's what really stood out of the whole thing, how he's a mentor there for him, and he made him follow him, after all those things. That's what really stuck out of the whole of the play.
Thank you so much, James. I appreciate you being the first.
Thank you
so much. Yeah.
Hi, everyone. Thank you guys so much for having me. My name is Shayna Harrison. I am the program director for New Yorkers Against Gun Violence. We do a lot of different things. We have an education program and a legislation program. So we work on the supply and the demand side of gun violence. I definitely want to talk to you guys a little bit more about what we do, but watching this play to me was just awesome. It really, really was, sitting in the audience and just literally sometimes I was closing my eyes and just imagining being in that space and seeing what was happening and just the emotions and just thinking about the trauma and the residual effect of this kind of violence, what the father was feeling, what the children were feeling during the time, what the wife was feeling during the time. And it made me think about power and protection. When we work with young people every day, we ask them, why do people pick up guns? And a lot of times young people say, to be powerful or to protect myself. And we always talk about that artificial power. And guns give you some sense of artificial power. I think about your brain under fire. This sounds a lot like, I can give you guys a story. One of my board members at New Yorkers Against Gun Violence is actually a licensed gun owner. And he lives in an amazing neighborhood. And one day his daughter asked him whether or not she could go to a party. And it was a school night, so of course he said no. And she decided to go anyway. And she, in the middle of the night, she snuck out and went to the party. She climbed out of the window and she went to the party. And in the middle of the night, she came back from the party. And the same window that she snuck out of, she tried to sneak back into and broke a lamp. And at that time, when she broke the lamp, he heard some noise downstairs. And he got up. And because he was a licensed gun owner, the first thing he did was grab his gun. Because that's what you do. It's there. Guns make you make different decisions. You're not necessarily thinking about, let me go see where my children are. He might have thought to do that before he picked up the gun. Or maybe let me wake up my wife. Let me make sure that they're all in one room and then I'll go see what's happening. But because he had the gun kind of made him feel like Superman. And he picked up that gun, and he went downstairs, and he saw a shadow, and he shot. And that's your brain under fire sometimes. So when we talk about, I'm just trying to relate that to the work that I do. I see young people, going from having a small argument, playing cards, to actually shooting their friend. How did that happen? Because you had a gun? It was just there. Accessibility. Having that artificial power so close to you. So that's what I thought about just listening to this play. The fact that, it's really, really hard to choose not to pick up the gun when it's around you, especially when you feel unsafe, or especially when you feel like someone is testing your power, So I think, just thinking about Hercules and thinking about his strength and always having his weapons on him, and always having to be, on. He's cursed. In every space he's in, he's always on. And after I speak to a lot of my young people, a lot of them feel that way. A lot of them go to parties with weapons. How are you going to have fun and you have a weapon? I'm confused. But because I have to be on. So when you have young people constantly feeling like they have to be on, those things happen. So I just, it just made me think a lot about, I wish some of my young people were here. I think they would have got a lot out of this play, but it was amazing. And thank you guys so much for having me.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you. Good night, everyone. My name is Brian Cunningham. I'm the Deputy Director for the Crown Heights Mediation Center in Brooklyn. The line that really stood out to me, first of all, you guys did an amazing job. At the acting, I can just visually see everything so clear with just your voices. But the line that stood out to me was the part about being a slave to your own fate. And I think that part to me is something that, as a person, I struggle with, right? It's like imposter syndrome all the time, that nothing good should ever happen to you because of the zip code you grew up in, because of the kind of schools you grew up in, because of the things you've committed in the past. And I think for me, that was the most powerful truth, that line alone. And the other part to me was the two other parts that really just jumped out. And the second part was being so in pain of all the baggage you're carrying from being born into your fate, and how that pain transfers to everyone around you. That you're so hurt, so bottled up that you can't even see the pain that you're creating on those you love the most. And when that pain subsides, when you finally get a wind of yourself, you realize how much damage you've created with your family, with your friends, in your community. I think the last part that really just stood out was obviously the friendship piece. That no matter how many people that are against you, there's always that one person, whether it be a family member, a friend, or just someone that you spoke to on your way somewhere that can change your entire trajectory and turn things around, no matter what fate you were born into. So I think those three things for me were the things that really stood out, is that your fate is not you. You can alter your fate, and you can also have people along this journey. And it only needs to be one person that can be there for you that will help change.
Thank you so much, Brian. Thank you.
Hey, everybody. My name is Stephanie Uberall. I am the Director of Violence Prevention for the Citizens Crime Commission, and I work with all the Cure Violence sites. I've been doing this for about 5.5 years now, and I'm really blessed to be a part of such a great team. So thank you all for sharing this evening. I think there are two things that really stuck out. I'm glad everybody talked about the friendship piece, because that was really important, is that there are always people there for you no matter what you've done. But I think the language, and it was said twice, it said, allow me to be here for you. Allow me, as when we are super ashamed of what we've done or we're having a hard time, we still need to allow people to help us. And so that's something I have to work on all the time, is allowing people to be there for me. I like to do everything for myself all the time. And so I think that's a message that we can all really, or at least I hope everybody can hear. And I think the other piece was the initial cry in the very beginning really brought me back to this shooting response that we had like maybe a year ago, and this mother was just wailing over her dead daughter. And I think about the grief that we all experience when we lose somebody, never mind lose somebody really violently and unexpectedly. And it's very emotional, and that raw emotion, it stays with me. And whether I see it in person or in a video, or it's that deep, undeniable pain that we experience in those moments, and that's very real. And as normalized as we are to this violence, whether it's in our community, at a school, on TV, that always makes it so real that someone important to someone is gone, and in such a horrible way. So that's what's like rolling around in my head after this. So thank you.
Thank you so much. I'd love to thank our 4 panelists with a big round of applause. Thank you so much. It's no small thing to get up, especially with just learning as you walk in the door you're going to be getting up. But for all of you, to make such personal connections across time to your own experiences, I want to thank you for your candor, for getting your courage, for getting us started. As I mentioned before, my back is going to be turned to you at this point as we go out into the audience, but not out of disrespect. And you have 4 live mics, so anytime you feel moved, like the voice of God, come back into the conversation and just jump in, say, hey, Brian, or don't even say, hey, Brian, come right back in. I hope you will. And now I'm going to turn back out to you, and I have a second mic runner over there, Marjolaine, our company manager. And just restate the question really briefly. Now that you've seen the actors going for broke, and you've heard these 4 wonderful panelists making such personal connections across time to their own experiences, in spite of the distance of culture and time, in spite of the fact this was in ancient Greece, about a Greek hero, in spite of the fact that it wasn't written with our time in mind or any kind of educational objectives, what did you recognize that spoke to you as true tonight in the story? What resonated with you? What spoke to your own experiences? Thank you so much. Yeah.
Hello, everyone.
Hey.
I would say that I sat here for a while and I watched an all-black cast perform this specific play around violence, and I said, okay, how is this progressive to reinforce black men or black women at the hands of violence or at the fault of violence? And then I heard the panel speak and I said, okay, so now we're going from the inside out. And what really rang true about the story was that Hercules' circumstances, where he was born, what he was born into, whether it's institutional racism or whether it's institutionalized prejudice or anything outside in, right? His friends still gave him the chance to restart. So I just thought that's very true, is that we're born into these circumstances that we have no control over, and we're entitled to our rage and our anger. And sometimes that gets us to a point of uncontrollable, and we can't take it back, the things that we do as a result of where we come from. But then the strength that it takes to forgive ourselves and move on, and to allow ourselves to be forgiven and move on, that's the part where I was like, oh, I see why this story had to be told by these people at this time and in this framework.
Thank you so much. Is that a hand? Yeah. Usually I do a whole soft shoe to get someone to speak first. I really appreciate you. I talk about how the person who's going to speak is going to be the most intelligent, most attractive, greatest person in the room. And you beat me to the punch. So thank you so much for everything you said. I really appreciate it, sir. Oh, that wasn't a hand. If your hand comes above your shoulder, we'll be all over you with a microphone. There's a hand right there. I'm coming right back to you. Yeah.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much. My name is Rob Moore. I represent Street Corner Resources, one of the Cure Violence sites. And if you know anything about Cure Violence, you know it's a health-based approach to attacking violence. And one of the main things I notice is, and what we try to stop is, and what we believe is, violence begets violence. As Hercules went in there and tried to take back his home from someone who legitimately took his home and took his kingdom while he was away, he used violence to do so. And because of that violence affected him. And that's what we try to make sure that people know in Cure Violence, that when violence happens to someone, you know, when violence happens to a loved one or someone you see in the street, it affects people. And in this play, it affected Hercules and made him act out violently. It affected his father. The father was seeing his grandkids dead, and that affected him in some type of way. He was sad, he was depressed, he was overcome. Violence affected his friend, Hercules' friend. So, you know, the play, even though it was written so long ago, it still touches base today of how violence can affect those individuals and how people act out on that violence when it happens. So I want everyone to remember that, violence way back then is the same as today. No matter how it takes place, no matter how it happens, it will affect people. And one of the true things that Cure Violence tries to do, especially Street Corner Resources, is get between that violence and stop it. So I'm proud to see this play today, and I'm proud to see the dynamics, to see that, even back then, things was happening, and it relates to today.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate all that. Thank you. Yeah. We've been so inspired to work with the Cure Violence sites, and it's been, kind of life-changing. You hear, in theory, the idea that violence is a public health epidemic. You hear in theory the idea that there's no difference between perpetrator and victim from this framework or model. But when you see people enacting those values, it changes your orientation. And so hearing you speak and also having seen the work that so many of the groups in this audience have done has been really powerful for us. And I think you're right. I think it really does connect to what's in the play. I mean, of course, I would like for that to be the case because I wrote the translation and thought I was really clever for having put the play on in front of you all. But I actually think that I think you're right. I think our first project was for the military, and it was about violence in a different context. The impact of war on individuals, on families, on everyone. And we have this word now in the mental health community, moral injury. And what the military and this cohort of millennials who went to Iraq and Afghanistan are teaching us, and what Cure Violence is teaching us as well, is that moral injury is one of the wounds that cuts the deepest. To do something that betrays your inner compass, your sense of who you are and what's right. That perpetrating violence is as damaging as being on the receiving end of it. So I appreciate everything that was said. I feel like now that I've talked long enough, maybe someone else would like to take on the first question of what spoke to you tonight, what resonated with you as truthful, what touched you in the play and spoke to your experience. There's a hand in the back, right over there.
Further to Ms. Harrison's thoughts and what the gentleman had just said, I found it critical that Hercules had said at one point, referring to the invincible weapon, that we committed that murder. And how shameful that 2,500 years after this piece is written, we still live with a daily cliche that guns don't kill people, people kill people.
Thank you so much. Yeah, that's a beautiful connection. I haven't heard that said, and that's really terrific. Thank you. Anybody else? Yeah, there's a hand. Is that someone's pointing to someone? Yeah, you're volunteering someone to their left. Right. I want to take this question on what spoke to you, what resonated with you. Yes, ma'am. There's a hand right there. Yeah.
Hi. I wanted to thank you. I'm sorry, I don't know your name, ma'am. What you said about the presence of a gun makes doing things more possible. It just struck a bell with me. I just never thought about that. You don't go and find something, but if it's there, go for it. And I want to thank you for that perspective. I also wanted to just mention that Hercules is falling into madness is also another thing that we do today in terms of mental illness. What he did when he did it was a form of mental illness, and there's so much of that begets violence today too. And I just found it interesting that was in there like that. But thank you very much for what you said. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you so much. I really appreciate that comment too. The play is called The Madness of Hercules in the Greek, or Heracles in the Greek, and I think that's right. It's as much a play about mental health as it is about the weapon and the violence. We don't normally let our actors speak, but no one else is beating Frankie to the punch right now, so.
No, I've done this play many times, and it just hit me today, this question about, the play is called The Madness of Hercules, I get that, but many times when people, they have random acts of violence, and then they say because of some force outside of them caused them to do it. So are we as a community, a civilization, are we to be forgiving of this because you say the person was not in their normal mental state? It was something else, demons or circumstances or something beyond them that caused them to do this act. I have a question as to how do we deal with that, especially if it's something that's personal or even if it's not?
Yeah, thank you so much, Frank. I'm glad we let you speak. That's a terrific question. And I'm glad you spoke. There's a hand right over there. I think one of the conversations we're having, we have a corrections project as well, where we're performing at Rikers and also other county and city jails and also prisons. Maybe, and I'm not answering the question, but the play really asks hard questions about not just, I'm not going to say forgiveness because that's maybe not a Greek concept in the play, but how do we, how do we process violence that happens to our families, our communities, and not inflict more violence on necessarily the perpetrators, and is incarceration or the kinds of ways that we've dealt with violence in our communities and our cities the proper response, in terms of if someone is responsible for having enacted violence. And so, I just want to expand the question further, but sure, yes, sir.
Yeah. Well, this picks up on part of what Frankie was saying. There's a lot of things that spoke to me, tonight. But as someone who, my sister was shot 25 years ago, and we're talking about a play 2,500 years ago, so 25 is a interesting number tonight. But as I said, many things spoke to me tonight, but I keep hearing that moment when Councilmember Williams was saying, I don't remember the word exactly as you translated it, but I have to still love this person because he is my son. And I think as a community, when violence happens to us, we of course experience many different emotions, but we have to ask that ultimate question of what do we do with that's happened to us? And if we don't find a way to let that anger and that rage eventually go, we don't make any progress. And 2,500 years from now, if we're all still here, we'll still be talking about this stuff. And we'll still be saying, why are we stuck here? And why are we still such a violent species?
Thank you so much for sharing your perspective and your story. I thank you so much for taking on the question. Yeah, please.
Yeah.
Panel, jump in.
I just want to add the mentor part, and a lot of us do career violence. I've been incarcerated. I did 5 years in prison. People told me, forget about it. You ain't gonna be nothing. Hang yourself. Hey, and I'm glad I had a mentor. And the people that talk to me. I'm able to let the kids know, hey, if I could be a director or a community affairs, so could you. Life is not over. So it really stood out is when life wasn't really over for him. There's more after that. That's important. You know, you have to, and all the Quran partners here that I see, it's about, about mentoring and being there for them. You know, my brother did 7 years, came home, did 7 years, came home, did 4 years, and he's working now, you know, and you know, a lot of people told him to give up, you know, told him he's a gang member, he ain't gonna be nothing, you know, and he just flipped it. So that's what really stood out, just being a mentor and being there for them. That's part of the solutions. That's it.
Thank you so much. I'm going to shift gears to a second of 3 questions, and you can also answer the first question whenever you get an answer. You have a thought, you can make up your own question and answer it. We don't care, but we want to move through a few other themes before we get to the cookies. So here's the second question. It has to do, and again, if there's a hand over here, you can just fold your answer in or just ignore the question altogether. But the question is simply this. It's about the weapons. We've talked a little bit about it so far. We've sort of skirted around it. But there's this incredible moment in the text of the Greek play where Hercules basically is contemplating going with Theseus to Athens, leaving Thebes, his city and his home. And he says of his weapons, "If I take you, you'll be forever clattering on my shoulder, saying, 'We're the ones who killed your children and your wife. We're the ones who did it. And if I put you down, then I'll be defenseless. And I'll never be, I will be an open target for anyone who wants to kill me.'" And I wondered if that moment or that thought that he expressed in that moment, if I leave you on my shoulders, you'll be forever reminding me of what I did and how you helped me and what I did to my own family. If I put you down, then I'll be defenseless. And he ultimately decides to keep his weapons in the context of play. If anyone could speak to that idea. Is that a hand there? Yeah. If that resonated with you.
Well, I think when that came up, I thought of just literally on the news today, one of the kids that was in the school yesterday talking about how she was going to be a junior NRA member. And now she can't even think of looking at a gun. So, I mean, there is the element of how timeless that thought, well, so many of these thoughts are. But, I mean, just the fact that was literally almost something that somebody who experienced horrible violence yesterday thought. So it doesn't answer the dilemma of do you or do you not. But, I mean, certainly for her, it was unthinkable for her to think of picking up a weapon and pointing it at anything anymore. So just how immediate that was to our experience.
Thank you so much for taking on the question. I really appreciate it. Yes, sir.
That line when he was talking about the weapons, it made me think about how layered. It was a great illustration of trauma, PTSD, kind of how when you have harmed or been harmed or caused harm, to understand the world around you, you need to simplify it, right? So you need to either say, you're going to be a constant reminder of what I did, but if I drop you, I'm no longer safe. So trying to navigate that nuanced relationship with this is really is what many people that are suffering with traumatic experiences deal with daily. In the work that we do in the Mediation Center, we definitely have a lot of young men and women who have really complicated relationships when it comes to weapons or keeping themselves safe. And it's important for us to really provide understanding of that conflict for them and not lead with any sort of judgment, but also kind of hoping that understand that this takes time. It was, that line was an amazing illustration of the complexity of the trauma.
And if I could just jump in.
Brian.
So Kenton, I knew you were going to go for that question, by the way. I said, this is Kenton all the way with therapeutic services. But the subsequent line on that was also, it's not death I fear, but the guilt. And I feel like a lot of people are still dealing with the guilt. So even if you put the weapon down, you still have that guilt you live with. But I think what we're not thinking about in the larger context of violence is changing the systems that create this violence as well. Because there is a desire for someone's safety and this weapon making them feel safe. So until the conditions in our communities, particularly communities that are in our catchment areas of cure violence, we're gonna continually, unfortunately, see these problems and those situations change because folks have a tendency, if you throw something right, I'm going to blink and block. And that is the weapon for a lot of folks. It's the blink and the block and the trauma and the therapy that still needs to happen for healing to happen on both sides of the gun.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I
also want to piggyback off what you were saying. I'm like listening to you, and I'm like, yes, that's what I was gonna say. But because I think working with young people, you're constantly telling them, there are other things that you can do. Just put, you can put down the gun. And they say to me, my students are extremely frank with me. I teach at 8 different high schools all around the city, and they'll say to me, okay, I put down the gun. Now what? Now what? And as a person who's doing this work, I got to figure out what the now what is before I ask them to put down the gun, because I got about 5 minutes to fill that in before they pick it up again. But I think so many people we're not thinking about the now what. We're just asking these young people to feel defenseless all the time and not necessarily giving them any resources to get that power that unfortunately the gun is giving them. And just to go to you said something, we were talking about the school shooting and the young woman thinking about joining the NRA and things like that. I mean, I always think about who else was around when these killings were happening and what were they seeing. It's so interesting to me when we have a school shooting, the amount of people who are purchasing guns goes way up. When Barack Obama became the president of the United States, the amount of people who purchased guns was ridiculous because they thought that he was going to take the guns away. Or Virginia Tech or Columbine, the amount of people who purchase guns, it goes way up. And, again, we got to think about the kind of fear, because fear equals consumption. When you make people afraid, they buy guns or they pick up weapons because they're afraid. And so, I just thinking about him saying, if I either I take you or I leave you, I think not just him, but the people around him as well. You would think that after, being a part of a school shooting, that you will walk away from that valuing your life differently and, just thinking about weapons differently. But a lot of young people and parents are thinking that they need to purchase weapons. As a teacher, I've had conversations with other teachers saying, do you think we would be safer if we had guns in the classroom? And I'm just looking at them like every single president I ever know that was killed was standing next to somebody who had a gun to protect them. So I don't think that I would be safe with guns in my classroom. But that's an honest conversation that I don't think many people are having,
Thank you so much. Is there a hand over here? Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much.
I feel that guns are a way to have strength, or concrete strength, because people don't really know about abstract strength. Like, some people use a gun for protection, and some people use a gun just to have it. Like, if you feel like someone's gonna come for you, you're just gonna go get a gun to protect yourself from anything. But if the strength is to get yourself out of the situation before that even happens. So I feel. I feel like if you was to get yourself out of the situation before that even happens, then you don't need a gun. Like, guns are just there because, you take someone's life, you say, oh, I have that, I did that. Or it's a form of, you know what I'm capable of, you stop bothering me. But no one's going to bother you if you don't put yourself in a situation before. So.
Thank you so much. Yeah. Really powerful. So redefining what strength means, redefining the dynamics of what strength means, and is part of what obviously you're suggesting, that there's a strength, much greater strength than having a gun, which is avoiding violence altogether and avoiding situations where you would be in those situations. Yeah, Queen. I was waiting for you, Queen. Thank you.
Speaking of what this woman and the woman over there said, earlier I had seen a political comic, and it was about the school shooting, where you see the bodies of the kids laying around and you see some guy holding a book, and on the book it says NRA, and it's Uncle Sam protecting him, saying, you're okay. And it's sad that we're so worried about keeping other people out from other countries instead of focusing on what's going on in our country now. And to piggyback on what she said about teacher having guns in the classrooms, teachers now are still begging to get pencil sharpeners and pens and extra pencils in the classroom. So the school now has money to buy guns, thinking that's going to protect now. What if one of the teachers get mad at the students? And there's many occasions where teachers have fits. What if they get mad enough that they want to shoot their students now? Now we're in a situation where a school paid for guns and the teacher shot up the students. Now what?
Thank you so much, Queen. Thank you so much. I don't want to embarrass Queen. We met Queen out in Arvern, which is near Rockaway, with the group Rock Safe that's here tonight, and she's 16, still 16, right? So when you're eligible for running for president, just know that you have a whole group of people behind you. There's a hand over here, and then I'm going to shift to a third question in just a second. Yeah, back there.
I just want to speak to the young man who spoke about strength before you need the gun.
Yeah.
And I would like to offer a personal example in brevity that may or may not inspire, but it inspires me. A couple years ago, I was born and raised in Texas, where guns are everywhere. The Wild West still exists, in my opinion. I'm black, as you can see, so I haven't been a resident of Texas for a number of years. Anyway, I was there a couple years ago for some family events. And because I hadn't been there for some time, I was renting a car and I was using a GPS to get around. And I found myself on a service road at one point because I got turned around, and I was just outside of downtown Dallas, and alongside some residences on my right-hand side. And I was looking towards my right, messing around with the GPS. It was stuck to the window. Unbeknownst to me, a patrol car had crept up alongside my vehicle. And when I say crept, there were no sirens, there was no lights, nothing. And I only noticed when you get that feeling that something's present. So I looked to my left, and there was this person, this man, this police officer, and the way he was looking at me was so intense, and so it created such a fear in me. And I want to point out a few things. I could not see his hands. I don't know where they were. His passenger side window was down, and he had on reflector glasses, so I couldn't even discern, the full face, the full expression. And I looked at him, and part of me was like, I could be like, what are you doing? What's going on with you? Like, give me your badge. I could have had all kinds of reactions, but instead I was like, hey, how's it going? And I actually just put my full Texas on in a way where I was just like, I'm just on the side of the, and he said to me, are you okay? And I was like, yes, I'm fine. And then he said, well, what are you doing? And I was like, oh, I'm just fixing my GPS here. And he was like, well, this is not the neighborhood where you should be parked like this. And I said, no problem. And he was like, so you should pull down the road. I was like, I will pull down the road. And he just stared at me for a few more seconds, and I was just smiling. And then he pulled off, and I pulled off. I had no idea where I was going, but I did pull off. So the moral of this story for myself, and I've repeated it to myself, was that I didn't freak out. I didn't challenge him in any way when I could have. My human rights, I could have. But I chose to just say, I'm going to give this man the benefit of the doubt. Because I feel like in this moment, what's going to get me through it is if I just treat him like a fellow human being. So I really resonate with what the young man said, with strength before you need some gun power.
Thank you so much. Thank you. And it's really powerful. I mean, every comment that's been made has just made the discussion way more, dynamic. And we started with this idea of power, but then we expanded it by talking about mental health and about safety and about strength. And now adding this element of, the very structure that's supposed to be in place to protect people, potentially making people feel not safe, and also enacting acts of violence that perpetrate violence in communities all over the world and in the country. And so that's another element of this. It's totally open game for us to talk about. We also have a police community relations project called Antigone and Ferguson, which if you haven't seen, we're going to do a run of it next fall here in Harlem, that engages directly in that conversation as well. But they're all one project at the end of the day, because we know about intersectionality, and we know that we can't extract any of these questions from, and I know that Cure Violence practices those values as well. I'm going to shift gears to a third. Oh, so there's a hand over here? There's a hand over here. Someone saw a hand, but now we've killed it. Is there a hand? Sorry. Marlene, you're pointing towards someone and I can't see. Okay, so there's false alarm. A hand here. Yeah, right here. Okay, terrific. If we just keep shouting about hands, one will come up. Yeah.
First, I'd like to thank Otto for inviting us. Now, in hearing this play, even though Hercules is quite a heroic figure, he has gone beyond the pale to me. He has done the unforgivable and is being forgiven for it. Now, how does that correlate today to our society? We have children being shot in schools. We have people who are at parties being shot. There's violence over and over again, and what is going on? The people that make these Herculean magical weapons are being given a pass. It's okay. This notion that people kill people is not quite true. People with guns kill people, and it takes a true intent and a hatred and a violence in your soul to do it. It's not something that should be taken lightly and given a pass. It's okay, boys. Winchester is a good thing. Thank you.
Thank you so much. You guys want to jump in? You look like you did, so yeah, there's a hand over here. Yeah. You can always jump in.
Is there a hand?
I just want to say that one of my friends, he just died recently, like a couple of days ago. He died at a very young age, 15.
I'm sorry.
Like, it was related how you said that he stood by Hercules' side full time, all the time. And some of my friends think just because he joined a gang is bad, but I'm like, forget all that. I knew him for like almost 10, 11 years now. Yep, 10, 11 years. And when he died, I'm like, and from a gun, like, if he probably didn't have that gun, he probably would have died regardless. I mean, but everyone can't live forever. It was just related to how y'all said, so you stand by your friend's side full time. The next day I went to school, that thing just couldn't get off my mind. I went to my after school program and my friends like, you all right? I'm like, nah. And they stood by my side full time. I think that's what all friends should do all the time, every day, all day.
Thank you so much for sharing your story, and I'm very sorry about your friend. I know it's not easy to bring that into the room, and I just want to thank you for what you said. It's a perfect segue to the third question, which is sort of the hardest question, and it's sort of synthesizing a couple of the things that have been said that don't fully come together yet, and I want to ask you about it. So it's been brought up several times that Theseus, instead of judging Hercules, instead of incarcerating him, instead of throwing him into exile, stands by him. And not only does he stand by him, he says, Hercules says, I'm afraid that the pollution, it will stain your clothes, will stain you. And Theseus, his friend, says, you must share the pollution of what you have done with your friends. And then he says a little bit later, soak me in the blood, cover me in the blood, and I will take you to Athens and I'll give you half of what I own. And I'll make a home for you. What do you make of this act when he says, soak me in the blood? What is Theseus doing when he says that? And did it resonate with you specifically as you heard it tonight or speak to you in a specific way? What do you make of this moment where this friend says what he says? Oh, so yeah, if I put my back. Yeah,
it's unconditional love. That's what it is.
It's unconditional love. There's a hand here, yeah.
One is, to me, it was about share your shame. The blood I interpreted as shame. The other thing that really struck me, and maybe I misunderstood, was I didn't think he was forgiving Hercules as much as he was saying, this is what fate dealt to you. What are you going to do with it?
Yeah,
so.
Thank you so much. He says in response to Hercules, I'm here to mourn in reverence for what you have lost. He doesn't say I forgive you. And I think that's an important distinction in terms of what he's doing as he stands by his side. Your hand's back up here.
I'll just look at it as, well, let's put the cure violence twist to it. A lot of us credible messengers, I guess, we are credible for some things that society deems reprehensible, right? And within that walk of life that a lot of us led, we had a lot of friends. And we did a lot of things that I guess we weren't proud of. But we were all brothers and sisters of the same struggle, whether your predicament was attacking poverty through selling drugs, attacking poverty through just robbing somebody, because that's just where your mind was at. Poverty breeds a certain type of mentality, right? So within that, you have fraternities and sororities of the Bane nature, to say the least. So when I heard that, I'm like, wow, because I've been in that situation where you have some friends who've done some things, and the only ones they can depend on is the people who are victims of that same struggle. So I've never judged them guys, right? Because at that moment, we were victims of the same hypocrisies, right? So we embraced each other, and whatever the cataclysmic condition they created, we both embraced it together. And when I saw that, I was like, wow, okay. Because I remember being in houses where guys come and the clips, the gun's still smoking. And this is what I just did, so what do? And I said, well, just make your burden my burden, and let's see how we can, remedy this situation, right? So a lot of us credible messengers and our careless whisperers and our conscience, we sit there and say, wow, there's a lot of times we could have made better decisions. And I said, no, we are making better decisions because we joined this movement, right? So the fraternity and sorority is a little different because we're allowing people, younger people who may have made decisions that were destitute because of poverty, same thing like we made, but we try to share the lens and say, okay, you don't have to go down that way or walk a life in order to pay a penance, so to speak. So that's what came to mind.
Yeah. I think the other thing that we're making assumptions as well in some respect.
Yeah.
We're assuming that it was a gun.
Yeah.
But guns aren't the only thing that's killing people in society. It's lack of education that's killing people. It's food deserts that are killing people. There are a number of things that are systematically killing people as well. So I think when we look at the totality of what's killing people in our communities, those are the things that we're trying to make right, right? And I think this idea that Hercules had 25,000 of years ago is a practice we're trying to practice today, which is restorative justice. That for every wrong that someone commits, if with the right systems in place, with restoring systems that are broken and creating a cure for the broken system, that we can make things right and make people rehabilitated back into society and productive, meaningful people in society and help heal our society divides.
Thank you so much to both of you. I really appreciate that. And we were performing on a basketball court in the Howard houses. In Howard houses? Yeah, in Howard House. Sorry, we've done a lot of performances in the Howard houses outdoors. And someone took on this question, and they actually criticized Theseus's version of restorative justice. And he said, if he were actually really a friend, he wouldn't take him away from the bodies. He wouldn't hide him away from the act. That the restorative justice model of taking people away from the crimes they've committed or the violence they've been in somehow engaged in actually does damage to them and to the community. And I thought it was an important thing that person swung it in that direction. I really appreciate everything you just said, Brian, but I also feel like that person had a point as well, that this kind of restorative justice or this model that Theseus is modeling isn't so perfect at the end of the day, that it's assailable in many of the same ways that our system is assailable now for taking people away. Queen, you're our best customer, but I can never deny you when your hand comes up. Please come.
I also think that the best would be forgiveness. Forgiveness kills. There was a situation where this mother had lost her son, and she went to the face of his killer and forgave him. And that killed him the most because it didn't shun him away from his crime, but it really made him think about what he's done, and he realized that he has broken a home. And it's sad that it takes a broken home for a community to want to come together.
Thank you so much, Queen. I really appreciate that. Thank you. Yeah.
Something I've been thinking about, which I really want to bring up around all these cure violence groups, and especially the leaders of these groups, is how do you deal with someone who is older than you, or who has sort of, I don't know, has age on you and feels like they have more authority over you, but who is ignorant to the harm that something like guns can cause? Like, how do you interact with this person? How do you say, like, do you know what this weapon could do? Because, like, my father grew up in Chicago, and he was he was very familiar with the gang violence in Chicago. And so even in his later career, when he moved to Atlanta, he's like showing me where the guns are in the house. Cause like, if someone comes in here, you go get one of these guns. It's gonna be one in every room. And if someone comes in here, you go get one of these guns and you shoot them. I don't care who they are. Like, and that's what I was taught. And so how do you deal with, someone that is an authoritative figure telling you this is your weapon?
Maybe someone from the cure violence world would like to take this question on, or we can let it float. There's a hand right here, yeah.
In a case like that, I would get out the house in case anything's going on, and to avoid getting shot.
Thank you so much. Does anyone else want to jump into this? There's a hand right here, yeah.
Well, hi guys. I don't have an answer to your question, but me personally, I'm very young. I'm only 17. So I'm a part of Street Corner Resources, and one thing that I always do, and I'm able to talk to people who are older than me. And I'm in this program where I am supposed to be like, basically, I'm supposed to be the one who they try to talk to people who carries the gun instead of, but I'm not the one who's carrying the gun. I'm the one who's dealing with the people who actually do carry the guns. So I'm in a room with a whole bunch of people who actually probably shot somebody, or they rather most likely to shoot somebody, and I have to talk to them. And the way that I find it is that I try to find positive things to talk to them about, and to see like, oh, well, maybe let's talk about life. What's beyond just shooting? What's beyond just the gun? Because it's hard to answer, but I personally am the one that's always talking people out of doing stuff. So if I'm in school, they'll always call me to do mediations because two kids want to fight each other, and because I have that influence with them. But I'm the youngest one in the room. It's like age doesn't matter, it's how you talk to them. You can tell somebody, my mother, my father, I can talk to them out of arguing with each other. I could talk to my uncle who has a gun charge out of putting that gun down. And it's just your approach, how you talk to them and what you say to them. Because telling them, oh, you gotta put that gun down, that's not gonna change their mind. You gotta let them know the ins and outs, and that's not okay. That's just me.
I really appreciate all the young people who've spoken tonight. I get the sense from what many of you said that you have seen and experienced things that have given you profound wisdom that you've been sharing with us. And I really appreciate everything that's been shared. Does anyone else want to take on this final question of, is that a hand in the back? Yes, sir. Yeah, right there.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Devontae. I represent SOS Best Eye. The question you just asked is kind of ironic because I was that kid. I was told by my uncle. I was born and raised in Brooklyn, because he was deep and heavy into the drugs and running around in the streets and everything. I was told, if X, Y, and Z happens, you know where this is at, and you being the man in the house the most of the times, it's up to you to do what you got to do if it came to. And me growing up and having a different outlook as a young male, from young I always looked at things from a different perspective, and being told that, I was so young to know that I was told that if something was to happen, I can pull a trigger. I was scared. You know what I'm saying? And then right in that moment, it hit me. It was a decision to be made. And at the end of the day, even though people of high authority and or aggression, like the young lady said, it's all about how you talk to a person, but at the same time, it's also how you as a person take it in and how you respond to it. And for me, being told to do one thing if something happened or occurred under no matter what and under any circumstances, I chose to be the one to say, you know what, if I feel like something like that's gonna happen because of what's happening around me, I can't be here. You know? Like, it always gonna start with you at the end of the day, no matter what. No matter what information you're given. If I know where something is at and I gotta do X, Y, and Z, listen, I'd rather truly fight somebody versus take the life or shoot them and critically injure them. Because at the end of the day, that's something that you're gonna be tormented with and you gotta deal with it. You know? And it's just sad because a lot of times that people, they put that burden on people that they know that they can manipulate mentally. You know what I'm saying? And if they know they have that power to do so, I feel like it's like saying like an OG putting the decision on a youngster to do something that he know he's not gonna get in trouble for, and not knowing it, you gonna do what was told under false judgment, and it's gonna put you in this situation because a lot of times, like you said, the person who's telling you to do such, he's not that friend that's gonna be there for you when it all runs bad. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. I really appreciate the question and how it's moved out across so many different perspectives. What I hear, and we're going to carry it with us to our next performances of this project, is that this is a youth-born movement in a certain way, that maybe that gives us hope that it's this generation, this millennial generation and younger, that actually has now the moral fortitude and the courage and the vocabulary and the ability to express itself and to take on the authority of the generation that's been perpetrating violence, on the nation that's been perpetrating and perpetuating the cycle of violence. And one of the questions at the center of this play is, how do we break the cycle of violence? I feel like that's in this play for an audience that had experienced nonstop violence. How do we interrupt it? How do we mediate it? How do we stop it? And I feel like so many people have spoken to that this evening. Yeah.
To your last question, and also just to talk about mental health a little bit, because I think that might be really important, especially when we are sitting here and we've heard actors of color talking. And let's be honest, when we talk about mental health and we talk about people of color, that's always a kind of like a different conversation. And I think we need to have that today too. We have to. We can't walk out of this room without having it. One of the things that stood out to me was, when his friend was basically telling Hercules, they were having a conversation about him being cursed. And he was talking about all the things that he's gone through, all the curses. His friend was listening to him. And he was able to identify with those things that he was talking about. He was able to kind of like, he had like a laundry list of things that has happened to him that led up to this point. And as I watched the school shooting, it was kind of the same thing. There was a laundry list of things that has happened to this young man before he chose to commit the crime that he did. And when I watch people of color who are quote unquote perpetrators of violence, we never necessarily see the laundry list of the trauma that they've encountered, but we see the laundry list of crimes that they might have committed, right? We don't see the fact that they're in foster care or that they, live in food deserts or they live in NYCHA housing and they don't have heat or they don't have jobs. We don't see that necessarily. We just see the laundry list of the crimes that they may have committed. So I think it's kind of weird, as I was listening to that, I kind of felt good that I was able to, he was a person. Even, he killed his family, but I still saw him as a person. And I don't think that's not forgiveness. You're not forgiving somebody by allowing them to tell their story. You're allowing people to see people, and not just when it's beneficial to you, right? You're allowing mental illness. You're allowing people to quote unquote claim mental illness no matter what color their skin is, right? Because trauma is mental illness too, right? So I don't know. I just listening to that and just listening to you guys today, and I know you asked a question about, should we start to just, write things off as just being mentally ill and things like that. I just think that it's important for us to have the same measurements, no matter who you are or where you're from, when it comes to trying to diagnose why people do the things that they do. We can't just say, well, this particular kid is from Harlem and he doesn't deserve to be seen as a human being, so that's it.
Thank you so much. Just to jump on that for a second, when we first approached Crown Heights Mediation Center and said we want to do this project, gun violence, Amy Ellenbogen, the director's response is, well, we don't really need a project about guns.
Yeah.
We need a project about mental health. And we had this really, I think, dynamic and charged conversation about what is it? For the last 10 years, we've been doing work with military populations, and even with our military in this country, there are people who serve in our country, serve our country, experience violence, come back from war, and come back to mental health deserts. In urban areas all over our country, there are mental health deserts, just like a food desert. And then you add cultural attitudes toward mental health, which may be fully justified by the way people feel they've been treated or judged or dehumanized. And we have the situation we're in. So I really appreciate you bringing mental health into the room, but also acknowledge, we're here to acknowledge that sometimes having these conversations about shining a very bright light into a space that doesn't have the things that it needs to have, and having people who've spoken tonight articulate what's needed is really important. Having it be live streamed and lived on WNYC's site for another year is really important, and then amplifying it in as many ways as we can. Ma'am.
I was just, when the play was being read earlier, was kind of reflecting on the point where Hercules gets home, and I guess the crux of the story is him perpetrating violence against his family. But I guess leveraging off what was just said a moment ago, Hercules' history has been perpetrating violence against people his whole life. And I just think it was so eloquently spoken about in the room, where this idea of the act of perpetrating violence itself is trauma. And I think in this instance, the kind of crux of the story is when it becomes personal for Hercules, the understanding, I guess, the nature of that grief and what that causes. But it was just such an interesting contrast to me that there's all these bodies of people he doesn't know laying in his house. And that sort of passes by without a lot of mention, but when it becomes personal, it becomes meaningful. But I think all of those experiences had up to that time almost build up that trauma that then brings it close to home. And I think it's just an interesting reflection point from the discussion in the room.
It's a really powerful thing to bring into the room, especially here at WNYC, where we've created this kind of artificial coming together of people who may not normally sit next to each other. And we did a performance in cultural venues, and we did a performance in San Francisco where this was raised by a woman who really addressed the white audience, who was from the Bayview audience, an African American woman, who said, very intensely things about the firstborn children of the white audience members, and challenged them to think about how being complicit in systems of oppression and violence that are oppressing the community in which we were performing is the same as taking the firstborn children of the people that were speaking on stage and as part of the conversation. And so that when does it become personal for us? The reason we do theater, and the reason I'm an evangelist for this form of bringing everyone together and having 4 actors read at a table, is that we have become inured to the suffering that we consume through our media. And maybe just the novelty of a play, just for a second, can shake us awake to have an actor scream at us, even as awkwardly as we do it, for a second, can shake us and make it personal, or help us to feel what we should be feeling, but we can't anymore because it's become so normalized and we become so inured to it from the way we consume it. The other thing I just want to say, since I'm on my high horse for just a brief moment, is simply one of the reasons I think Theseus says what he says is because the blood is already on our hands. And what the cure violence model also, I think, exemplifies, but I mean it as a privileged white consumer of violence in this culture, that the blood is on our hands because we're complicit in the systems of oppression that have created the violence. And so to simply say, the blood is on your hands, you go away, it's your fault, I will not forgive you. It's not just, Theseus isn't just a friend, he's someone who's coming to consciousness of his own complicit nature in this whole equation. He's part of the problem, and he's been at war with Hercules, perpetrating violence for over a generation now. There's a hand, I think, over here, or no, maybe not. Is that a hand? Oh, it was a half hand. You sure? Okay, all right, we can come back to you. There's a hand right there, yeah, and we'll take a couple more, and then we want to make sure there's time just to chat more informally over these great cookies.
So I'm coming from a social work perspective with one of the public defender's offices in the city. The communities most affected by incarceration, by the food deserts, by lack of education, are the ones that we should be seeking for these solutions. The Close Rikers campaign has the reasons why we've had a lot of alternatives to incarceration in the courts, and the reductions in the violence in our communities are because of the Cure Violence movement. I've been doing this for 20 years. Since Cure Violence has been coming up over like the past 5 years or so, you've definitely seen a reduction in violence amongst the kids that I work with. I advocate for kids, alternatives to incarceration, for kids under 22. You've definitely seen the changes in the courts, the way the judges think about our kids. It takes a lot for our kids to wind up in a more terrible system like Rikers. There's a lot more movement here, and I think that is true, like the gentleman said about credible messengers. The most credible messengers are the ones who've experienced the pain and the trauma. We've all experienced pain and trauma in our lives, no matter what community you've come from, but there's a specific pain that gun violence has caused to many communities. And it is the credible messengers that have changed the movement, changed the direction of the way we're going, and it's the only reason why we're even thinking of closing Rikers, and definitely, for sure, why we have to close Rikers Island.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, that's sort of the basis of our whole understanding of what we're doing, why we're here. That audiences with skin in the game have everything to teach us and each other about these questions, and that we have to subvert the hierarchies that exist in our culture to allow those, to not to permit them, but to amplify the voices that are coming up out of communities you serve and that have been talked about here. And so we're hoping to do that more and more, and we hope that there's some people here who will bring us to your community as well. Yes, ma'am.
As someone who's an arts professional, this play was incredibly important for me to see, and someone who is definitely supportive of the programs that you guys do for recidivism. But do the young people also get an opportunity to participate in these kind of artistic releases as well, which is also critical for them not to just be viewers, but artists themselves and trying to figure out different ways of expressing themselves. And this is specifically for the panelists.
Well,
okay.
Yes.
I don't think you're talking about.
Yes, we definitely have some of the participants or some of the kids here, but we definitely engage them. We use music as a way to express themselves, promoting peace. And as he said, we have to offer them alternatives. We just can't say put the guns down. We have to give them alternatives and resources and life skills and also as being credible messengers. We show them that there's other ways of doing things. But yes, it's about engaging them and having youth panels. And we have a circle of safety now that we have. We mobilize the community, and we want to organize we want to hear the youth's voice. Their opinion matters. They're the future. So definitely, it's a must.
Yes. Absolutely. Yes. And we, New Yorkers Against Gun Violence we have bullied our way into the Board of Education at this point. I don't care. I'm I need to get in there. Because I just feel like this should be a part of our everyday curriculum. This should be a part of, gun violence prevention should be a part of everyday curriculum, just like math and health and anything else. So we offer our program as a 4-credit class. We act directly with the health teacher, and we look at gun violence as a public health issue. We're actually right now working with the mayor's office to get it in more schools. We are a nonprofit organization, so we are privately, funded by people like you guys. But we're trying to get into as many schools as possible to offer this particular program. One of the things that I will say is that I started working with New Yorkers Against Gun Violence, and I actually worked with the Crown Heights Mediation Center. That was my first job, so I'm like really happy to sit next to you. But I started working with the New Yorkers Against Gun Violence when I was really, really young, and one of the reasons, I was like 17, and one of the reasons why I started working there was the first thing they asked me to do was to sit in a room with like politicians, the mayor was there, and police officers, and they asked young people, like, why do young people pick up guns? And the politicians and the adults and the I guess like community members had to be quiet, and we were the only ones allowed to speak. And I was just like, whoa, this platform is amazing to me, you know? And I was like, but we need to continue to create spaces like this because unfortunately, young people are the ones disproportionately affected by gun violence, and they are the experts on this issue. They know where the guns are, they know why people are picking them up, but no one's asking them anything, you know? So our particular program, we take students to Washington, D.C., we take them to Albany, we take them to district offices because we want to create activists. We want them to understand how they can advocate for themselves. And I don't care if it's for sneakers or it's to, you know, for a traffic light closer to your house. I want you to be able to do that, you know? So just listening to you and understanding that young people have so many different talents and everyone doesn't look like Barack Obama or Michelle Obama. That might not necessarily be where they want to go. Some of them are artists, but we want them to know that you can use whatever talent you have to reduce and create peace. Absolutely whatever talent that and whatever it looks like. So thank you for pointing that out.
And Brian, I know that Save Our Streets has a pretty strong arts program.
Yeah,
I was a judge for a painting contest.
Yeah, we have Arts to End Violence.
Yeah.
We have YOSOS, Youth Organized Save Our Streets, and also Make It Happen. Kenton, director over there, is actually putting together a studio right now for our young people to express their artistic practice in our building. So the entire basement has been regutted. We are putting a lot of money into that basement to make sure that they have not only just the artistic practice, but the tools to create the practice as well. So yes, definitely.
Thank you so much. We're getting close to the end of our time together in this room. We're going to encourage people to go to the next, but maybe you had something burning within you to say tonight that wasn't addressed by one of our extremely leading questions. Maybe someone here wanted to say something, and speak now or forever hold your peace. You're most welcome. There's a hand here, and maybe a couple people.
So from the thing that I noticed from the Hercules was the mental health and also kind of like a domestic violence. Yes. That's what I captured.
Yeah, thank you. We partner with the Mayor's Office to combat domestic violence on several projects right now. And the first time we invited them, we didn't even characterize it as a project that would speak to domestic violence, but as we've learned from them, domestic violence maps onto all 20 of our projects. In fact, they could all be domestic violence projects, as we're now learning. And this one is definitely one of them, and I appreciate you bringing that into there. There's a hand over here. Yes, sir. Sorry to make you wait. Yeah, absolutely.
Like how I said, the gun violence really needs to end. Like I was with two of my friends, like in the basketball court. Like, there's an entrance right here and an entrance right here. We just sit on the bench, chilling, cracking, like talking jokes. Oh, we just hear gunshots right there in front of my building, and we started running. Like, my friend, he possibly could have lost his life. We running, and he said he heard the bullet hit the gate and went past his leg. Like, he felt the wind from the bullet. It went like this past his leg. Like, after he told me, after we stopped running, he said he nearly had a heart attack. I'm like, we started walking. I don't know why, but we started walking as far as from that situation as possible before something else could possibly happen to him. We ain't go back home till like a 2 hour later, until like the cops found them and arrested them. So I wanted to look out for him before I lose anyone else that I care about and like consider as a brother.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Anyone else like to say something? You see a hand? Oh, yes, of course. Okay, no pressure. No pressure to say something that assimilates everything. Oh, there's one other person? Okay, you're going to have the last word back there, but I'll come to you first. And then
I just want to say that First of all, thank you for everybody who's in this room, and thank you for everybody who's doing this work on a grassroots level within the community and within the place where it's all happening. And I think what I've gotten from all of this is that it takes a village, beyond it takes a village, it also takes a village to neutralize the thoughts and the upheavals from other members of the village. So we have to continue to speak out. So even to you, I would say that it's better to speak up than to shut up. And I think that it's really time that in this age bracket specifically, our words really hit the ceiling real loud, like louder than we think it does. I have conversations with my mom, and she'll come back months later and be like, you know that thing you said 5 years ago? It finally, and parents are really stubborn, and their generation is a little, they're very set in their ways. So it's up to us to speak really loudly. And we are a part of our village, and we're being raised by the members that are older than us, and we're also a part of that exchange of knowledge and information. So my last word is just keep on talking about it, young man. Like, keep on telling your friends that's not cool. Like, we should probably get up out of this situation. And don't be afraid to do that. Even though it's scary, like I'm shaking right now talking to y'all, right? But you have to do it. And I think it's our responsibility to do it. That's it.
No. We're going to let that be the last word. Okay, that was such a good last word. So in closing, I just want to, there's no way for us to put a ribbon on this conversation. We didn't come here to finish it. We just came here to start a strain of it. Many people here who are in this room have seen us in their communities. We'd love to come back with any one of our 20 projects and stay in dialogue and also work to find ways to amplify the work of artists who are already working in those communities. Before closing, I'm going to thank everybody who's come out tonight, our actors, our panelists, with one big round of applause. And I want to also say, just a piece of housekeeping, everyone has a survey in your, so before you get a cookie, if you could just fill out the survey and drop it off outside, we'd be grateful. We're going to be here next month, March 14. I hope you'll come to that performance as well. It'll be on military families, and the comments that came in tonight would be just as relevant. I want to thank all of you for coming out tonight. It's been a great pleasure and a privilege. We look forward to talking to you over cookies in the reception next door. Thank you so much.